Good evening, buenas noches, and thank you for tuning in tonight. On behalf of Mitchell Kaplan and all of us at Books and Books, you're in for a treat tonight with author Donald Ray Pollock, director Antonio Campos, actor Harry Melling, and producer Randall Poster as they discuss the upcoming film adaptation of Pollock's sensational novel, The Devil All the Time, on the eve of the film's premiere on Netflix. In The Devil All the Time, Donald Ray Pollock has written a novel that marries the twisted intensity of Oliver Stone with the religious and gothic overtones of Flannery O'Connor at her most haunting. Donald's literary debut, the critically acclaimed 2008 story collection Knock 'em Stiff, received the 2009 Penn Bingham Fellowship. He holds an MFA from Ohio State University, and his work has appeared in the New York Times, among other publications. Antonio Campos is an acclaimed writer, producer, and director. His notable feature credits as a director include the Sundance sensation Christine, starring Rebecca Hall, Simon Killer, starring Brady Corbett, and After School, which premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2008 and featured Ezra Miller in his debut performance. Harry Melling is a British screen and stage actor. He currently stars in Netflix critically acclaimed global hit The Old Guard, and now The Devil All the Time. Melling is perhaps best known on screen for portraying Dudley Dursley across 5 films in the Harry Potter film franchise. And our moderator, Randall Poster, brings unique experience and perspective to his work as a producer of the film. For 3 decades, Poster has worked at the forefront of American filmmaking, working as music supervisor for Wes Anderson, Martin Scorsese, and Todd Haynes, among others. And now, without further ado, let's get the program started. Go ahead.
So, Don, I think we're going to kick things off with your reading a little bit from the book.
All right.
Let's do that.
Okay, so we're just going to read the first page of the prologue. On a dismal morning near the end of a wet October, Arvin Eugene Russell hurried behind his father, Willard, along the edge of a pasture that overlooked a long and rocky hollow in southern Ohio called Knock 'em Stiff. Willard was tall and raw-boned, and Arvin had a hard time keeping up with him. The field was overgrown with briar patches and fading clumps of chickweed and thistle, and ground fog, thick as the gray clouds above, reached to the 9-year-old boy's knees. After a few minutes, they veered off into the woods and followed a narrow deer path down the hill until they came to a log lying in a small clearing, the remains of a big red oak that had fallen many years ago. A weathered cross, fitted together out of boards pried from the back of the ramshackle barn behind their farmhouse, leaned slightly eastward in the soft ground a few yards below them. Willard eased himself down on the high side of the log and motioned for his son to kneel down beside him in the dead, soggy leaves. Unless he had whiskey running through his veins, Willard came to the clearing every morning and evening to talk to God. Arvin didn't know which was worse, the drinking or the praying. As far back as he could remember, it seemed that his father had fought the devil all the time. Arvin shivered with the damp, pulled his coat a little tighter. He wished he were still in bed. Even school, with all its miseries, was better than this. But it was a Saturday, and there was no way to get around it. Okay.
Pretty good.
That's where it started.
Well, it's kind of incredible that we find ourselves here so many years after I read that page.
Yeah.
And it's pretty remarkable that you know the film is going to be there for the world to see starting tomorrow, after our long journey together to transform the written word to something cinematic. And I guess just as far as some background goes, is that I had first read the book while I was working with Antonio and really, I read it without any preconception in terms of looking for something to make into a movie. I just sort of allowed myself to sort of enter into this world and sort of came out of it thinking that I'd really love to see it transformed and pass it on to Antonio, and thus began the process of our work together to sort of bring these characters to life and bring them to the screen. And I guess, you know, sort of as a question that I would have to start this off, Don, is that, you know, was there any point when you were working on the book that you had any notion of it as a movie?
No. I mean, you know, when I'm writing something, I try not to allow myself to get any hopes up, of course, and also not to think about an audience. You know, because if I start thinking about, well, you know, is the reader going to like this line, or am I going a little bit too far here, or, you know, that sort of thing, um, it holds me back. So, you know, while I was working on the book, I was just, you know, my only objective was to write a story and finish it. So, no real dreams of you know, it ever becoming a movie or anything like that.
You know, just in terms of also just turning back a little bit in time, was, you know, I'd first read, I guess it was the story collection that led me to The Devil All the Time. The story collection Knock 'em Stiff, which, you know, it's such a great word, really, and it's something that I think that Antonio and I have just always relished, just the parlance and just sort of the way that it kind of just comes out of you and has just is immediately just, it just feels like something, you know, just as far as, and it's very rare, I think, that geography summons a kinetic response, and yet I think we always responded to the word knock 'em stiff, and, you know, have relished sort of embroidering it on hats and sort of seeing it on the page.
Yeah.
And so I guess my question in terms of the stories, which, you know, really got a lot of attention, while you were working on the stories, was that something, was Devil All the Time ruminating at all while you were working on the Knock 'em Stiff collection?
No, not at all. You know, you know, I worked in a paper mill, and then when I was 50, I decided that this is what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, was to write. And so I left the mill and I went to grad school. So I finished Knock 'em Stiff in grad school. And, you know, to get out of school, to get my degree, I had to write you know, I had to have a thesis or whatever you want to call it. And so after I finished the stories, and I was, you know, pretty much in my last year, I was going to have to turn in about 60 or 70 pages of, you know, new stuff. And I started writing. I decided I was going to write a novel about a serial killer couple. Their name was Carl and Sandy Henderson. And so that whole 60 or 70 pages was just Carl and Sandy. And then I left, you know, I got out of school, I came home, I kept looking at it, and I figured out that probably nobody was really going to want to read an entire novel about just these two people. And, you know, I started coming up with other characters. I came up with Arvin first. You know, at first, Arvin was like, he was like 18 or 19 years old, you know, and then I reworked him again, you know. I revise a lot. So, you know, but that's how it came about. You know, I wasn't really thinking of a novel when I was working on the stories. I actually didn't think I could write a novel. You know, I didn't think I could do something that big.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting in terms of our. I mean, Antonio, you can speak to this. It's just, how we, or how you, Antonio, kind of your process of getting your mind around the story as a movie. How would you describe that?
Um, it's I always say it was a hard one because we loved everything in the book so much. And I think I've adapted a book before that didn't get made in a movie. And in that case, I didn't like the book. I thought there was a seed of an idea, and then we kind of built off of that idea. But it wasn't that hard of an adaptation because it was like, I didn't really love all the things in the book. I just kind of liked there was a conceit there. In the case of this, Paulo and I really loved, we loved everything. And the thing that we really felt strongly about was capturing the spirit of the book and the essence of the book and the essence of all these characters and stories. And we felt like in order to do that, to create an experience that felt like the book, you kind of needed a bit of the episodic quality that's in the book, and to also kind of allow the story to reveal itself, to sort of the bigger narrative to reveal itself the way that it does in the book. And so we just kind of looked for a way to do that structurally. And once we kind of figured out the structure, then it was kind of like things just sort of started to fall into place more. And it became a lot about editing and sculpting. But the book, the book, the tone of the book and the atmosphere of the book was something that we were just kind of constantly we just embraced, and we just wanted to bring in. And the language of the book was something that we loved so much, because we also we wanted Don's voice to be able to speak that language the way that we heard it in our heads. So yeah, it was that. Once we figured out the structure and how to kind of do justice to the way that Don told the story in a feature, then we kind of just sort of things started falling into place.
I mean, it was interesting. I mean, it was for the audience out there, it was a really long process in terms of the transformation to take this novel that, as Antonio has described, which is these interweaving stories that each of them had such great details and such great elements, to finally, to refine it to the point where it was digestible as a film script, and also where it was explicitly a film script rather than just sort of a reorganized novel, if that makes any sense. And I think that, I mean, this is something we can talk more about. But it wasn't really, I don't think, from my vantage point, it wasn't until all of a sudden that when the narrator appeared, that I felt like we were in control of our story, really, and how uniquely the narrator allowed us to put forward, I think, the unique tone of the novel. How do you oftentimes in a novel, it's really sort of the strength of the authorial presence that elevates the story, and that's something that's really challenging to do in a movie, and yet we committed to doing that. And I don't know if people know, or they've heard, or they will see, is that Don is the narrator in the movie, which is something that the notion of it and then the reality of it is something that we were all just in love with. So that's something that I think is very special about the movie. And Harry, to bring you into the conversation. So, you came to the film having just read the screenplay, really. And and looked at it, I know from a couple of different angles, and how would you say that did the story or the script, did it, did it strike you immediately, or did you what was it that was really the what magnetized you towards the story?
I think when I first read the script, it was just the characters. It was such an amazing ensemble of characters, which is quite rare to find in a story. I mean, usually you follow one person quite strongly, and the other characters sort of float around that protagonist. But with the script and the book, every single person is so beautifully defined and crafted. And so from that perspective, that was something I really wanted to be a part of. And then, of course, after reading the script, I went to the book, and sometimes as an actor, it can be a bit of a red herring, because you don't want to get too lost in a book. You want to remember what you're doing. You're making a film. But in this case, it was so useful, because it just helped iron out a few choices that maybe you were sort of playing with when thinking about Roy. So it became a sort of Bible alongside the script, when certainly the early stages of developing the character. So yeah, it just, I mean, it's so rich. Everything about Don's story is so rich, and I think that's what drew me to it.
It's interesting is that the film is so geographically specific, and in terms of just hearing you read about the prayer log, that's such a central location in the film, and really how challenged we were to sort of find that space, which in a sense it seemingly was just a very would on a certain facile level seem like, oh, that could be almost anywhere, and yet we really struggle to sort of find that spot. And as the film got made, or it's become clear to me, and I think to all of us who've been working editorially, is just that it was so important to find the perfect spot, because really it haunts the movie throughout. And it was curious is that, as specific, and this is where the movie magic comes in, is as specific as we are and were in creating this place and time, where we had gone out and looked at we're hoping to really shoot the film in Ohio and build the world from the world. We ended up shooting the movie in Birmingham, Alabama. And yet somehow, it's sort of like the Alabama that exists in the movie, I think now is can be classified as Ohio adjacent, in the sense that it really feels like it is this rare hamlet and map of the imagination that will forever be joined to, what was it? There's the Coney Island of the mind, and this is the Knock'em-Stiff Ohio of the mind. And I think really, Antonio, that maybe you could talk about sort of, how, in terms of the process, how you work to create this place that is not only, born out of fiction as well as reality, but also where you're evoking the past, and how you sort of work to sort of create this this era in American life that I think is so poignant.
We were obsessed with locations. I mean, you remember how many location scouts we had scouring northern Alabama and then southern Alabama and then western Alabama, and I mean we were obsessed with getting the locations right. It wasn't just like we could find any house. It was like we were looking for the house, the house that Don described, but it was hard because it wasn't just the details of the house. It was the feeling of the place. And so we were obsessed with finding the places that felt the way we felt when we read the book, when we wrote the script, and we talked about this world, and you know, some of it was just, you know, it was just that it was like we just had to go and look at every town and see what Main Street looked like, what we felt Mead would look like, and what bar felt like the Tecumseh. And then in the reality, it was like, well, we couldn't find a bar that felt exactly like the Tecumseh that we read, so we had to find a space that we could make look like that space, and we just trusted. I mean, I just trust in the process. It's like casting. You kind of just know who the right person is for a role just pretty quickly because it feels right, and so we just kind of went around about it, just making sure that everything that we put in this movie felt right, and trusted that if we did that, that it would all add up. And then just in terms of the America that we were creating, we just were very specific about the palette and the way that we shifted from a kind of Andrew Wyeth palette into something more like a William Eggleston photograph, and colors started getting more kind of just vibrant and almost mutating, like sort of natural colors from Wyeth started to mutate into this Eggleston world. But just about the prayer log, because that was one of the most complicated locations to find, and it was just basically a clearing in the woods. And it was something that we, from the beginning, because of, you know, just that description of that first page, which is the page that grabbed all of us here, you know, it was so important to find a place that felt like that. And we found a place. I don't know if I told you this, but we found a place, and then we were so excited by this space that we found, and then it rained like it always did in Alabama, and then it was flooded, and we had a week to find another place, and then we found that place about 50 yards up the hill, but we didn't have the right log, so we had to bring in the log that I liked into this space, and it was kind of like. It was madness in the sense that it was just a clearing in the woods, but it really needed to feel special. You know, it needed to feel that when Willard got there and he felt something, that we as the audience would also feel that thing. So it was when we would say the devil all the time was a very appropriate title for this movie, because it just felt like we were fighting the devil all the time on this production.
I've had people come up to me and go, "Can you please tell Antonio to pick a location? It's just a log in the woods."
Like, what does the log look like? And I was like, well, yeah. And then I would go and I would just open the book and I'd be like, look, this is what it looks like. You know, this is what it looks like. This is what it feels like.
I mean, just to clarify for people out there, if they didn't get, you know, if we skipped over it, is that we ended up in Alabama because by virtue of some actor availability, rather than shooting the movie in the spring, we needed to shoot the movie in the winter. And so we had to go where there was going to be some green, and we went as far south as we could before the vegetation got tropical. So that's sort of how we ended up in Alabama and not in Ohio.
Yeah, we had intended to shoot the film in Knock'em Stiff as much as possible, and Chillicothe.
Yeah,
and I think that the time that I spent with you, Don, I don't know if maybe share some of because part of the process that was so important to Paulo and I was getting to spend time in Ohio, and see Knock'em Stiff in person, and you kind of walked us through that world.
Right. Well, I can remember you talking about the prayer log. We drove up to that old orchard, what used to be an orchard up above Knock 'em Stiff. And I sort of pointed out to you, okay, the prayer log is right down over this hill. You know, that's where it would be if, you know, we were going to make the movie. And one thing I was really, you know, when you came here and, you know, you came, you know, several times and you just, you, by the time you finished, you knew more about this town than I did. And I've lived here all my life, you know, some of the old buildings that you got into and stuff like that. And, you know, it was a slight disappointment that we weren't able to film it here, but, um, you know, those things happen, and you know, we were. And I have to say that I think that, you know, the places you picked in Alabama, you know, just sort of, you know, they fit. I mean, they were. You did just as well down there, I think, as you would have here. Um, so yeah, I can't really think of anything else, you know, right offhand. There were. We had a lot of good talks and some good times, though, you know, talking about what you were going to do with it.
I mean, it was really a treat, Don. I mean, we did have you come and visit in Alabama.
Yeah,
And you
one
got
of
to
the
sort of
rainy.
stand by the side of the road as we worked in the prayer log, and you know, got to avoid the ticks, and you and I walked around a little bit in that park or wherever we were. I mean, how was that for you in terms of where there you know, at a certain point, I mean, the challenge of staying involved in the process is that here it is that, you know, your book is nothing if it's not very personal and specific. Um, how hard was it to surrender and sort of let the movie take the shape that it was going to take?
Um, I don't think it was that hard. I mean, there were, you know, probably, uh, gee, I guess really the only thing that I was a little disappointed with when we were, you know, we're working on the movie. I know a page is a minute, that sort of thing. But the relationship between Roy and Theodore, you know, I really wanted to see that in the movie, but you know, I got it that we couldn't do that, you know, that we didn't have time, and it was really going to take us way off the storyline. Um, but other than that, I didn't have a hard time letting go. You know, a book's a book, a movie's a movie. You know, they're two different mediums, and you know, they're not going to be ever really be the same, you know, or anything like that. Um, I think though that you know, when I was there, you know, and I was there about a day and a half, and I know that it had rained all night that first night I was down there, and then we went into those woods and it was soaking wet, you know, and I think though from that time that I was down there, you have to understand that I know nothing about making a movie or, you know, anything like that. But I definitely gained a new respect for actors and people who make movies, because we were there from 10 in the morning till I think I left at 10:30, and you guys were still shooting, you know, till 11:30 or 12 that night. And so I gained a newfound respect for people who do that kind of work, because it was really hard. Um, and yeah, that's one of the big things I got out of this.
Yeah. I remember that night. I don't know if you were still there, you know, in terms of, you know, they say that, you know, you know, you lead an army with their stomachs, or what's the quote, Antonio? Is that how an army is? And
Yeah.
I remember that, you know, constantly trying to feed people and keeping the crew's spirits up under very trying circumstances. I remember we had like a taco truck we brought up either later in the evening or something, and the truck sort of got stuck in the mud. It couldn't make it up the hill, and it was just sort of grinding. And I remember one of the key grips, Earl. I don't know if you remember Earl, Antonio, but he looked at me, goes, I think this movie is cursed. I just said, take that back right now. And he was like, what do you mean? I go, you take that back. And he's like, I said, say it. I take it back. And he goes, I take it back. Then I said, Earl, do you go to church? And he said, yeah, I go to church. He goes, I go to church every Sunday. I said, well, this Sunday you go to church and you say a prayer for for this movie, for saying that. Talking about Roy and Theo, which are these minstrels in the film, traveling minstrels, as Antonio and I call them. We always saw them on a certain level, in spite of some of the horrific things that they do. I guess in this Devil All the Time world, at a certain level we felt they were, in spite of that, they were our comic relief, which says something about what we were doing. But Harry, we cast a musician that had very little experience acting, named Pokey Lafarge, was somebody that I knew and had worked with on the music side of things. And I know he feels very sort of bound to you. Can you talk about, I think that was a sort of a unique responsibility that you had, or a unique opportunity in terms of, cultivating this relationship with another actor, because it had to sort of be on screen, and how you found that to sort of how or any anecdote or anything about sort of helping Pokey sort of understand some of the nuances of film acting.
We caught up quite early on. I think I was in Alabama and Pokey was coming down in like a week or so, and we just started up a dialogue about who we thought these two people were. And Pokey kept saying, I'm so nervous. I've not done this before. This is completely new. And I said, it would be completely fine. And it was. He was brilliant. He was absolutely brilliant. But in terms of feeling I had a responsibility to help him out, I thought he was completely in his element. And certainly, I think when we did the scene in the church and we did the song, I think that's when Pokey really sort of, and he said so as much. He said that he really felt that was an important day for him in terms of feeling comfortable with the whole setup and the new environment and how it all works. Probably because he was engaging it from a musical aspect, maybe. But I had such a joy working with Pokey. I really did. He's quite a character. So yeah.
Yeah, he's been having a lot of fun, I think, with the movie. He actually went on. A couple of people from the crew actually went and saw the film in theaters this past week, and the film is playing on like 23 screens and sort of a mix of locations that I think are just simply dictated by places that are allowing people to go to movie theaters. So he went in Chicago, I believe.
Yeah, I think he's in Chicago. Yeah.
Yeah, and some of the crew I know were Atlanta based, and they went in Atlanta. That's really fun to see. It's a shame, unfortunately, that we all couldn't be together and watch the movie with each other and with a crowd of people.
Just wanted to mention something about Theo, because we're talking about him. But that because I agree with Don, like that this storyline in the book was some of my favorite stuff. And we had at one point written a version where we went to the carnival. One of my favorite scenes was like this moment between Theo and Flapjack the clown. And it was just like, it was great. And if you should now have to go buy the book and read it if you don't know what I'm talking about.
Is it there a flamingo lady as well involved?
Yeah, well,
Yes, I
Roy
would
hooks
really
up
like to have seen Harry with the flamingo lady.
Yeah. And there was this great thing called The Prophet and the Picker, and they're doing their act in a carnival, and then Roy's got to eat bugs, which you should be grateful that we didn't do, because I would have totally asked you to eat bugs.
Absolutely,
as well
yeah.
writers are you. But it was some of my favorite stuff in the book, and you know, I'm very happy with everything that's stayed in the movie with Roy, and what we really had to do, Don, in terms of like the structure, is like, you know, the main drive of the movie is the Arvin Willard dynamic, and that story, making sure that we always return back to that narrative. But the Roy and Theo was so much about Roy and Theo, but then in the edit, we really kind of shaped it to be more Roy and Helen. And some of the stuff that we lost was Pokey's best stuff, and he did this amazing monologue. I don't know if you remember it, Harry, but that scene in the room that he's talking to you in the closet, and he's sort of drunk. He's drunk, and he's wondering sort of why everyone's praying to Jesus when he suffered just as much or more throughout his life, and no one's praying to him. And it was one of my favorite scenes in the movie, and then also the scene where he, you know, talks to you about, you know, escaping. But yeah, you know, those are the really tough choices that you have to make in the edit room, and
Sure, absolutely.
hope people can see it.
Oh, I totally get it. I mean, I understand why they couldn't be in there. It's just, you know,
I agree. Yeah,
it's something that we had to sacrifice.
Yeah.
I guess the other thing that was fun, Don, in terms of the process where you and I were interacting somewhat, and Antonio, was just talking about music and songs, and that you and I went back and forth with some songs, and you know, thankfully, or it was fun that, you know, a couple of those things did end up in the movie, and again, that's another sort of great device that services the film in terms of placing the story in time. And for me, in terms of my work helping to find the musical direction, is that, you know, I'm very proud of how we were able to, you know, use songs to anchor the film in time, and again, find ways to bring some of the real world into the storytelling, and provide a little bit of, at certain points, a little bit more counterpoint to the drama. You know, and I guess, you know, I would say, just in terms of talking about movies, I mean, Don, even though, in spite of like not necessarily having cinematic ambitions when you're writing, or cinematic notions, were you a moviegoer? Do you think that in terms of that as far as storytelling, that you bring a love of movies to your storytelling?
Oh, sure. I probably have learned just about as much about, you know, story from watching movies as I have from, you know, reading. You know, and for example, like if I watch a series like Fargo, you know, which is, you know, a series, you know, a long story, and I can learn a lot from something like that, or I think I do. I hope I do. So yeah, they definitely, when I was a kid, we had 3 channels on the TV, but we went to the drive-in just about every weekend through the warm weather. And, movies were, and that was around here, there weren't a whole lot of other things to do. So you went to the movies. And yeah, I've always loved movies, and, and I really do think that, they played a big influence on my writing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it's interesting is that it was really, I guess, in terms of my reading the book, where maybe I I I was really prompted to sort of think about it cinematically, was the Bodecker story, and I think for me, one of the most satisfying aspects of the film, or the most delightful moments of the film, or is when we sort of transition into sort of a genre, a bit of a genre film, is that in terms of like Bodecker, the corrupt sheriff, the lawless Confederates that he mixes with, covering his trail, confronting the elements of the story, confronting the people that challenge him. That's really when I guess in my mind I saw a movie, and I thank you, Antonio, for rendering it so well, because I really get such a, as our stories unfold, I think the Bodecker vein really comes in later in the sort of as we're beginning our movement towards the end of the film, and I just adore it. And it was the sort of, I get the same charge that I got when I first sort of read it in the novel.
And we took some liberties with that. We didn't take liberties, but we took a cue. That was an interesting part to adapt, because some of what we did with Bodecker was sort of the periphery in that storyline, which was the kind of Tater Brown and Bobo stuff. We kind of just wanted to explore that more, and so we had a lot of fun, kind of just taking a cue from what Don was doing and the characters that he was suggesting, and then running with it, because we just the fun of Don's work. And I think we all, like, I think we both felt this, Randy, was just like that. It just felt like it's this kind of Russian doll thing. We just kind of keep opening it up, and there's more and more, and that in every story. And I think you, like Heavenly Table, you go even further with this in a way, where you pass by a character, like a character that we're following, passes by another character, and then we kind of jump into their story for a little while and we get to know them, and then and there's and then we just jump back to our main character. And so there were so many clues in the book about these other kind of peripheral characters that Paulo and I were always looking for and seeing where we could go with it. And the Bodecker story we really had fun with. We just felt like we wanted to live in that world, for the reason that Randy described, as kind of like that really great noir genre aspect of the book.
Well, should we sing now the song, the Devil All the Time song? We're meant to take a few questions from the audience. So I actually am not sure how that works.
Actually, it was decided not to earlier this afternoon, so we don't have any. We could open it up, but I think we don't have any right now.
Okay.
I had this thing I wanted to show, which is to show you the book that the annotated version of the book that I kept as like the Bible on set, and I gave to everybody. You guys want to see that? Could show it to you.
Sure.
Special little treat. This was hold on, can you see? So this is kind of what it was like. I went through the book several times and just kind of color coordinated it, and essentially created a Bible that then I could break up and hand out to all the different departments and different actors, because we really felt like the book was the Bible of the film. The script was the script, and that was what we were working with. But that if you wanted to go like get into the deep nitty gritty of it, I just wanted the book to be always at our side. And so all of this stuff was like, and then even if character, like the character of the bus driver didn't make it into the movie, but he had all the details of the things that were in the book, and he was working with that, and we dressed him and put everything around him that was used from the book. Yeah.
I forgot about him.
What?
I
You forgot
forgot
about
about him.
I didn't. It was good.
So for $49.99, you get
Yeah,
the
you
annotated
could
book,
buy the
King
annotated
James Bible,
Devil all the
the
time.
signed Knock 'em Stiff, the night set,
Venmo me. Just Venmo me, and I'll send you a PDF.
and the Devil All the Time mask with filters
Maybe a
and
prayer
95
shawl.
filters.
How about a prayer shawl too?
Prayer shawl.
And if you act now, we will throw in your prayer shawl.
Well, you know what's exciting is just because we're here, but Don, I don't know if you know, but we're releasing the soundtrack of the movie, and it's going to come out like with Harry and Pokey's music from the film and songs, soundtrack, and then score.
So that'll come out digitally, I think, tomorrow, and then actually, I think we're going to have a LP record.
Wow.
So that'll be
fantastic.
fun.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that. All right.
Yep.
This has been quite an experience for me, guys.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's been a total pleasure, in spite of when it wasn't a total pleasure. But Don,
can we ask Don? Can we ask Don when his next book is coming out? Because everybody wants to read it.
Gee, that's a tough question. I just sent the book in today, and of course, Richard and Nat will look it over and let me know what I need to do. You know, sure, I'll have to do a little bit more work on it, but you know, if we're really lucky, sometime next year, toward the end of next year, maybe. Fingers crossed.
Okay.
And Don, what have you been reading? What was the last thing you read that you would recommend?
Gee, I really haven't been reading any fiction much lately because I've been working on the book a lot, and I try to avoid reading other people's, you know, reading other fiction because I'll tend to start stealing from it if I do. I've just been reading a couple volumes of essays by a guy's name is Joseph Epstein.
Right.
And, you know, he's from up around Chicago, and
University.
I really like his stuff, and I'm just pretty much doing that. Right now.
Harry, what have you been reading?
I've just finished this book called Featherhood by Charlie Gilmore, and it's kind of I guess it's a memoir of his young life and his dad, who was a poet, and he wasn't a very good dad, but it's really, really good. It's called Featherhood, not Fatherhood as I thought it was called. Featherhood.
Antonio, have you been doing it? Have you been able to do any reading?
I just, whatever you send me, Randy. That's basically all I read.
Okay.
That keeps me pretty busy.
So what about you, Randy?
I am about 40 pages. I'll be right. I am about.
We lost the moderator.
I'm back. I'm about 40 pages from the end of this book by Lionel Shriver called The Mandibles. And then I've been really loving, I've been reading these stories by Edward Jones called Lost in the City.
Oh yeah, that's a great
which
book.
I've been sort of taking it slow. I haven't really wanted to finish it, so I kind of treat myself to a story every week. And something that we should talk about off camera, but Antonio and I both read Fire in the Blood, Don. That was something that we read. It was actually we were drawn to it by, in the galleys they had a blurb from you, so we picked it up and we read it. So we can talk about that off camera. but certainly eager to read your next book, and maybe there'll be some way that we can get an early look at it or something. I don't know if I can wait till the end of 2021.
Well, we'll see what Richard says. Yeah.
Okay. Well, listen, it's great to see you guys. Harry, you're just a delight as always, and we miss you.
Yeah, you too, guys. So good seeing you all.
Yeah.
Harry, are you in London? Are you in London or LA?
London, yes. It's quite late, hence the moody lighting. But yeah, London.
All right. So if we have a quorum here, we're going to bring this to a close.
So I'd love to thank you for being with us tonight. Thank you for your passion, your love of reading, of writing, of filmmaking. I hope that maybe we'll be able to see you in real life in Miami. We have an art house cinema across the street. It's closed right now, but they show a lot of great films. And maybe we'll have a chance to screen something in the future, or even this one in the future. Until then, I thank you so much for being with us.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Nice to see you all.
Thank you. So good seeing you all, guys.
All right.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.